Like, you know, you always want to look at what the consequence of a technological transformation is. And this is a big transformation. You know, there used to be flagship media sources that were basically attempting to give a balanced picture, and I think they did a pretty good job 30 years ago. Time magazine, even the mainstream news programs, they had a professionalism that was associated with their journalism that had some degree of objectivity, and that's fragmented. And it's fragmenting because there's all these media sources, like innumerable media sources. And so it's driving people who are trying to get attention to desperation, and they exaggerate the polarity. And so that puts everyone on edge, and Twitter puts people on edge. And this is part of the reason I'm still thinking about what to do with Twitter. Maybe I should not use it for a month, because Twitter, I think, my experience with Twitter is that I'm wandering around in the world and everything's fine. The streets are peaceful. The people I meet are doing well. That your cities, I've been to, I don't know how many American cities in the last 4 months, like 40 or 50. They look great. You know, I mean, everywhere I go, there's construction, and the country feels like it's moving.
How does one person that's watching the news, and that's where the news they get from, they consume news through media. I'm watching CNN, Fox, MSNBC, whatever.
Yeah.
How do I tell apart between the truth and propaganda?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I counsel my clinical clients who are depressed or anxious, one of the things I've always told them to do over the last few decades is to disconnect themselves from the news. This was before the social media.
And you still believe that today?
Well, you asked me about CNN earlier. Like, I haven't watched mainstream television news since like 1985.
You gotta be kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Let me get this straight. I want to hear you say this one more time. You haven't watched mainstream media since 1985?
No, very little. I didn't have a TV. I didn't have a TV since about 1985.
When's the last time you watched CNN?
Probably in an airport for a few minutes. I virtually never watch CNN.
So if I come to your place, I know you have some interesting collection of art that you collect, but if I come to your place, your TV's not going to be on CNN.
There's no TV.
There's no TV in your house?
I haven't had a TV since 1985. I realized back in 1985 that news wasn't news. If it was only news for a day, it wasn't important. So I read magazines. You know, I read Harper's, or I'm not at the moment, Harper's, Atlantic Monthly, The Economist. Those were my basic sources for news. Now that's changed, you see, because I got tangled up so badly in scandal 2 years ago that I've been on top of, especially social media, like an obsessed addict for 2 years, trying to manage it. You know, but it's not clear to me that that's been a good thing. I've got to.
For your sanity, or for?
It's certainly. I don't think Twitter is a good thing for my sanity. Twitter is so contentious. It's so. I mean, if you want a daily dose of hate, you can get it in 10 minutes on Twitter. You know, if I post something, you know, there's a number of comments about whatever I posted, and 1 out of 4 of them is brutally rude and obnoxious, as nasty as it can possibly be. And that's very, very common. And like, you know, people are quite sensitive to negative information. We're more sensitive to negative information than we are to positive information. And I'm not complaining. I don't have to use Twitter. It's a completely voluntary choice. And I'm certainly a massive beneficiary of the existence of social media. So I'm not complaining about it. I don't have a right to complain about it. But it exists in absolute contrast to my experiences in the world. Like, it's not like I'm walking down the street and 1 person out of 4 jumps out of an alley and like curses me. I haven't had a single negative interaction with an individual. That's not true. I met one really drunk woman in Dublin, and she called me a wanker. But she was quite the piece of work, though.
Was it
with a little timid husband by her side.
Was it after Connor lost? Maybe she was pissed off because
maybe
the UFC
she was.
fight.
But I've had thousands of interactions with individual people on the street, let's say, in airports and so forth, in the last 6 months, and every single one of them has been overwhelmingly positive. So that's reality. Then I go into Twitter and it's like, oh my God, it's just brutal.
Does it really bother you, though? Do you really get bothered? And listen, all of us, you know, no one likes negative comments. Like right before this, Mario's sitting, I'm preparing my notes, and Mario's like, look at the 3 negative comments we got today. I'm like, Mario, I'm doing an interview. You're sitting here telling me. So obviously before doing something like this, but does it bother you a little bit when you read those negative comments?
Oh, definitely.
Really?
Oh, definitely. Well, look, when I was still working as a professor, I'm on unpaid leave at the moment. You know, I'd get my feedback from my students, and my feedback has been generally extraordinarily positive. So maybe there'll be 50 comments from students and 3 of them will be negative, something like that, or 2. And often quite nasty, the negative ones. And you remember the negative ones. And that is what people are like. We're much more sensitive to negative. And the reason for that is negative things can kill you. Positive things can make you a little happier.
So going back to it, I guess what you are saying is with the social media platform, you saying from 1985, you didn't consume any content on TV outside of pure accident. There's no TV at your house. In the last 2 years, you've done it because social media, so you kind of have to be aware.
Yeah, I had to be on top of it.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. Are you happier now that you're consuming the content last 2 years, or do you find yourself being, man, I'm a little bit more anxious than I was 2 years ago. I was a little bit more peaceful.
Oh, I'm way more anxious.
Really?
Oh, yes.
So are you thinking
more.
about going on a diet again from social media?
Well, no, look, it's complicated because my life has gone, my life was fairly broad. 2 years ago, I had a number of businesses. I had my clinical practice. I was working as a professor. I was writing. I was involved in lots of things. And so I had plenty to do, but since then it's gone like this. And some of it's unbelievably good. And some of it's really, really bad. And so the breadth of it has extended. And so there's no shortage of ridiculously positive things that are happening to me on an ongoing basis. I can't even believe it. But the same is true on the negative end. And so what's happened is the range of my emotional experience has expanded almost unbearably, I would say. So, and again, I'm not complaining about that because I could choose to do it differently. But some of this has also been a matter of management. It's like it is literally the case that although it's been a little better over the last 3 or 4 months, for about 18 months in a row, I was at the center of a scandal that could have taken me out at least twice a week. So constant, non-stop scandal of one form or another. And so that took a lot of juggling and management to see what was going on. And I was paying attention to social media and trying to figure out how to respond in the press and on YouTube and on my blog and all of these sorts of things, trying to learn how to do that. And so it's been an obsessive learning experience, let's say. YouTube has served me very, very well. My blog works out very well for me. The podcast, I have a podcast, it's very popular. That's worked out really well. Facebook, I don't pay much attention to Facebook, although I post on it. Twitter, that's something else. Twitter is, vicious, I don't know what to do with Twitter. I don't know what to do with Twitter. I think I go back and forth. I go back and forth. There's a part of me that there's people I keep up with on Twitter, the people I follow, some of these IDW types, so to speak. I see what Shapiro's posting, I see what Brett Weinstein's posting, and Sam Harris, and I kind of keep in the loop that way. And I feel a moral obligation to keep up. And I have 900,000 followers, and I feel an obligation to them too. But there's also this addictive curiosity, that what's happening. And I tried to pull myself away from that on the TV news because it's the same thing except in much less concentrated form. And it was good for me. And I do think if it's only important today, it's not important, right? If it's news, it doesn't matter if you don't know about it for a week.
That's powerful.
It's still news. But I still haven't figured out how to completely deal with all this social reach I have at my fingertips. I don't know exactly how to manage it.
You feel there's an addiction to it? Because that's the whole thing with social media, addiction to feel like you are committed to seeing what everybody else is doing because it's a part of loyalty. Like, I got to be loyal to them, and I kind of feel like they've been loyal to me. You feel there's some of that going on?
Oh, there's definitely some of that. But there's also I am insatiably curious about things. And so Twitter is terrible for that because it's just continual hits of information. So
I'm sure. Yeah, if you're talking reading a book a day and you all of a sudden have all this information to your hands, like, what is this? What's going on over here? What about this? Oh my gosh, what's it? So you can get really caught up with that.
Yes.
And that's starting to happen a lot with social media.